Minister Chandamavira Kodi says President Maithripala Sirisena instructed the Cabinet of Ministers to act in line with the promise made by the Prime Minister to trade unions with regard to the Trincomalee oil tank farm. Sipetco trade unions halted the strike action initiated yesterday following a written assurance from the Prime Minister.
A letter addressed by the Secretary to the Prime Minister on his behalf to the petroleum trade unions notes that only a political understanding will be reached during the Prime Minister's visit to India regarding various development projects. The letter assures that legally binding agreements will be entered into only after informing the trade unions and the relevant stakeholders. Sipetco trade unions initiated yesterday's strike on the premise that efforts were being made to sell the Trincomalee oil tank farm to an Indian oil company. The 102 oil tanks located in close proximity to the deep water port in Trincomalee were constructed by the British in 1930. As per an agreement between the government and the Lanka Indian Oil Corporation in 2003, 99 tanks were leased to Lanka IOC at $100,000 per annum. As per the preliminary agreement, a proper lease agreement was to be reached within 6 months.
In 2003, it was given to India on a 35-year lease by the UNP government. Not only that, in the 15 years since 2003, 4 successive governments, the UNP government in 2003, the Mahinda Rajapaksa regime from 2005 to 2010, the Mahinda Rajapaksa regime from 2010 to 2015, and the Chandrika Bandaranaike government from 2004 to 2005 had obtained $100,000 per annum as per this agreement.
All 102 oil tanks are with the Indian Oil Corporation. The land is what is important. As the minister, I raised the argument that the land belongs to the state, and as such, any property on that land also belongs to the state. So when it comes to state property, we cannot just give it over to another company on a lease basis. As such, the agreement was legal. This was the argument over the past 10 years.
Discussions have been held to allocate 10 tanks for Sipetco. IOC will receive 14 and Sipetco will receive 10. With regard to the balance 74 tanks, an agreement will be reached between the Indian and Sri Lankan governments to form a joint venture. This is what the Honourable Minister had discussed.
If this agreement is signed, then within a short period of time, IOC will monopolize the oil trade in Sri Lanka. They will be able to provide fuel at a loss for a short time. If they do so, all of our consumers will go there. This cannot be stopped. They are not doing this now because they do not have a fuel unloading or distribution center of their own. Since they know the China Bay Agreement is not in force, they are trying to enforce it.
The agreement, which they have labelled as bad and inoperational, was signed in October 2003. It was invalid in 6 months, following which the United National Front was dissolved and Chandrika formed her government. Then Mahinda came into power. None of these unions said back then that this was illegal and that oil cannot be stored here. They did not open their mouths to say that IOC must be removed and that this must be provided to Sipetco.
There is a possible solution. Both parties have shares in CPSTL. The oil needs to be stored. Let us lease it to CPSTL. They can use 1/3 of it if they wish. Sipetco can take 2/3 of the entire stock, but it is on a leasehold. Today, Sipetco can only store oil for 42 days. If we acquire that, oil can be stored for 4 months as a buffer stock. We must do this.
The President said very clearly at the Cabinet meeting today that political understandings reached during the visit to India must not violate the promises made to the trade unions. So will we continue to lease this at $100,000 each and develop it so it is more advantageous to Sri Lanka? We are not in favour of writing this off to any country.
The Prime Minister is not visiting India to take steps on this. As far as I am aware, the Prime Minister is going to discuss the ICTA agreement. Any decisions regarding the oil tanks will be made following extensive discussions with the relevant parties.